It is Monday morning in 1963. A man rises at 5:30, pulls on clean work clothes his wife pressed the night before, eats toast and tea at a kitchen table still smelling of Sunday's roast. He walks to the bus stop, nods at the same 3 neighbours he has nodded at for 11 years and arrives at work 7 minutes early. He has worked at the same factory, the same foundry, the same office since he was 17. He expects to work there until he is 65, and he is not unhappy about this. He is, in a quiet and uncomplicated way, proud. This is the story of what Australian working life felt like in the 1960s, and why that feeling is almost impossible to find today. The day always started before the sun, 5:30, the alarm's soft rattle, a hand reaching out from warm sheets. In the kitchen, the linoleum cool underfoot, there is the quiet shuffle of slippers and the hiss of the kettle. Toast pops up, thin curls of steam rising from a chipped mug of tea. The smell of last night's roast still hangs in the air, mingling with the starch of freshly pressed shirts. He buttons his collars with practiced hands, each movement steady, unhurried. There is a kind of pride in being ready early, 7 minutes early, every day, as if it is a promise kept to himself. Out on the street, the morning is crisp. The same 3 neighbours pass by, nods exchanged without words, a silent ritual that never changes. The bus arrives, its doors opening with a sigh. In this quiet choreography, there is comfort, a sense that the world is in its place, and so is he. At the bus stop, a man might be known not by his first name, but as the email man or the BHP bloke. In the city, women in crisp uniforms became Maya girls, a badge worn with quiet pride. Workplaces weren't just somewhere to clock in and out, they became a part of who you were. Your job was your introduction, your shorthand in the neighbourhood, your place in the world. At Friday drinks or backyard barbecues, the first question was always, where do you work? The answer carried weight. Answers might be, I'm with the bank, or I'm a fitter down at Ford. Even the children knew it. Dad was a Repco man, Mum was at Maya, Uncle Joe was with the council. One Maya saleswoman, years later, would say you didn't just sell dresses, you belonged. These names stitched people into the fabric of their town, each one a thread in a larger story. A pay packet in the early 1960s told a story of security. For a factory hand or tradesman, the average weekly wage hovered around £23, enough in most suburbs to buy a sturdy 3-bedroom home for £4,000 or £5,000. Mortgage payments rarely kept families awake at night. 2 or 3 weeks of paid leave each year meant holidays at the coast or time to paint the house. Penalty rates mattered too. Saturdays brought time and a half. Sundays and public holidays meant double pay. Overtime, when it came, was counted not as a burden, but as a chance to put a bit extra aside. Decimal currency arrived in 1966. £1 became $2. Coins changed shape, but the promise remained. A single wage could support a family, keep the fridge full, and leave a little for the future. These numbers were not just figures on a payslip, they were the scaffolding of dignity. An apprentice's journey began with a handshake and a promise, 4 years ahead, marked by early mornings and the steady weight of a toolbox. The first week, hands fumbled with spanners and files, skin soft and unmarked. By the end of that first year, blisters and calluses told their own story. Each tool had its place, polished at the end of every shift, as if respect for the trade started with respect for the gear. The foreman's eye missed nothing, a crooked weld, a cable not tucked just right or clocking in a minute late. There was pride in learning to measure twice and cut once, in mastering the quiet art of making something strong and true that might never be seen by anyone but your mates. At lunch, tins clinked open in the canteen, sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, laughter echoing down the line. These were the years when skill was passed hand to hand, and every lesson carried the weight of tradition. On the factory floor, the world ran on its own time. At BHP in Wollongong, the shift whistle cut through the morning air, calling thousands to their places. Ford in Geelong and GMH in Elizabeth were much the same. Rows of faces, hands already stained with grease. A quiet confidence in the way a spanner turned or a panel clicked into place. Here, a man's handshake meant more than a signature. The day you joined, the foreman clasped your hand and pressed a union card into your palm. A promise that you belonged, that you would be looked after. There were newsletters pinned to the notice board with cricket scores and wedding announcements, rosters for the footy club, and a list of who would bring lamingtons for the next smoko. At Repco, the same faces gathered at the same bench every lunch, swapping stories and sharing the news. When someone retired, the whole line would pause for a handshake and a velvet box. These rituals stitched people together, making the factory not just a place to earn a living, but a community in its own right. Inside the bank, the world moved at its own quiet pace. The teller's desk was polished smooth by decades of hands, the ledgers thick and heavy, each entry neat and deliberate. Some joined the branch straight from school and stayed for 30 years or more, their names written in careful script on long service certificates. In the public service too, a young man might start at 18 and retire at 65, his superannuation guaranteed, his farewell morning tea, a rite of passage. There was a different kind of pride here, less about calloused hands, more about trust and steadiness. But the deal was not the same for everyone. Women worked the counters and typed the letters, but their pay packets were always lighter. Women earned 3 out of every £4 a man took home. Married women could be asked to leave the public service altogether. And for Indigenous Australians, a proper wage was still out of reach, a fact Australia only began to reckon with after the 1967 referendum. The promise of work was real, but not always shared equally. Change came quietly at first, almost invisible. In the early 1970s, a single announcement in Parliament cut tariffs by a quarter almost overnight. The words sounded technical, just numbers on a page, but the meaning rippled out to every factory gate and lunchroom. Cheaper imports began to appear on shop shelves. The hum of the assembly line softened, then stuttered. By the end of the decade, some of the old faces had disappeared from the break room, their jobs sent somewhere far from Geelong, Elizabeth or Port Kembla. In the 1980s, the rules of pay and loyalty shifted again. Instead of one national wage, deals were struck at each workplace, one by one. The old promise, a job for life set by handshake and union card, grew uncertain. Enterprise bargaining meant some won more, but many found themselves negotiating alone. The word redundancy crept into conversations that once had only spoken of retirement. By the 1990s, the ground had shifted for good. Outsourcing and privatisation swept through banks, phone exchanges, and even the post office. Permanent jobs gave way to contracts and casual shifts. The certainty of a gold watch at the end of 40 years faded, replaced by a question about next week's roster. What had felt solid for a generation now seemed to slip away in the space of a few short decades. When the old routines faded, something else slipped quietly out the door. It was not just the steady job or the pay packet, but the feeling that you belonged to something larger than yourself. The places where people once gathered, canteens, union halls, even the footy teams sponsored by the local factory, grew quieter. The language changed too. Where someone might once have said, "I am with BHP" or "I am a Maya girl," now the answer was just a job title or a contract end date. The shorthand that stitched neighbours together began to unravel. Some still remember the sound of the whistle at the shift's end, or the way hands found each other across the lunch table, passing stories along with sandwiches. There are those who can still recall the weight of a foreman's handshake on their last day, or the way a gold watch felt in the palm, proof of 40 years done well. These memories linger, even as the factories stand empty and the old offices are turned into apartments. For many, what is missing is not only the certainty of a wage, but the sense of being needed, of being known. It is the quiet pride that came from building something side by side with people whose stories you knew by heart. That loss is hard to measure, but it settles in the air, a kind of ache that never really leaves. Today, the old promise of security for a life's work feels distant for many. Yet these hands, these mornings, built the roads, towns, and quiet certainties we still rely on. We are all living in what they made. Here's to the Australians who turned ordinary work into the bones of a nation.